The Senate hearing room crackled with tension. Every seat was filled, and camera lenses were trained like weapons on the two central figures. This wasn't just another political hearing. It felt like the preamble to a historic clash. Governor Ron DeSantis sat perfectly postured, his navy suit crisp, an American flag pin gleaming. He surveyed the room with the confidence of a man who dominated every debate he prepared for. He was ready for what he believed would be a victory lap. 20 feet away, Representative Jasmine Crockett arranged her notes with the calm of a surgeon. No nervous tics, no frantic shuffling, just a still, focused intensity. A slight smile played on her lips. Not warm, but knowing. The chairman's gavel cracked. "This hearing will come to order." The nation was watching. In 18 minutes, one of these two would leave politically wounded. The other would cement a legacy. DeSantis thought he was walking into a forum. Crockett knew she was setting a trap. To understand the earthquake, you needed to see the fault lines. Representative Jasmine Crockett was a force forged by personal history. Her grandmother had been turned away from a poll under Jim Crow. That memory fueled a brilliant legal career dedicated to civil rights and voting access. In Congress, colleagues called her the quiet storm. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, she wielded facts and the law with surgical precision, ending careers and changing policies. Governor Ron DeSantis was a political powerhouse. Harvard Law, Navy JAG, a governor with national ambitions. He had mastered turning culture war battles into media dominance and fundraising gold. In the past 2 years, he had signed some of the nation's most restrictive election laws, calling them election integrity measures. Critics called them voter suppression. The direct clash began when Crockett introduced the Voter Access Accountability Act, a narrow, constitutionally vetted bill setting federal minimum standards for ballot access. DeSantis had called it unconstitutional tyranny on Fox News. Crockett had responded by publishing a 47-page legal analysis proving its alignment with Supreme Court precedent. When DeSantis was invited to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee, he saw another stage. What he didn't know was that Crockett had spent 6 weeks in deep preparation. She had read every deposition he'd given in lawsuits against Florida's laws. She had compiled data from Florida's own election division that contradicted his public claims. She had found sworn testimony that didn't match his political statements. She had the ammunition. Now, she needed the moment. At 2:51 p.m., DeSantis began his opening statement. His voice was a practiced, confident cadence. "Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this opportunity to discuss one of the most fundamental questions in American governance. Where do we draw the line between state sovereignty and federal power?" He was masterful, weaving constitutional theory from James Madison with empirical data. He presented a color-coded map showing voter turnout increases across Florida. Since implementing our election integrity reforms, voter participation in Florida has increased across every demographic category, he stated. African American turnout, up 4.3%. Hispanic turnout, up 3.7%. These aren't my numbers. These are certified results. He turned his gaze toward Crockett. Representative Crockett's legislation is premised on a false assumption, that states cannot be trusted to manage their own elections fairly. But the evidence contradicts this premise entirely. For 30 minutes he fielded friendly questions from allies, expanding on his themes and delivering perfect sound bites. By 3:35 p.m. the hearing was going exactly as his team had planned. Then came the 6 words that changed everything. "Representative Crockett, you're recognized for questioning." Jasmine Crockett didn't stand. She simply leaned into her microphone, her voice measured and calm. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor DeSantis, I appreciate your testimony. I'd like to ask you some questions to clarify a few points." "Happy to answer," DeSantis replied, his confidence unshaken. "You mentioned voter turnout increased after your laws took effect, and you present this as evidence they didn't suppress voting. Is that fair?" That's precisely the point, DeSantis confirmed. The critics predicted disaster. The data shows the opposite. Crockett nodded. Governor, you're a Harvard-educated lawyer. You're familiar with the logical fallacy, post hoc ergo propter hoc? After this, therefore, because of this? The smile faded from DeSantis's face. Of course. So when you say turnout increased after your laws passed, you're noting a correlation, not claiming causation, correct? The point is that turnout didn't decrease as critics predicted, DeSantis deflected. That's a different claim, Crockett observed coolly. Let's examine it. Are you aware national turnout in 2020 hit a 120-year high, driven by pandemic mail voting and massive mobilization? Multiple factors contributed, yes. And Michigan, which expanded access, saw turnout rise 6.1%, higher than Florida's, correct. DeSantis hesitated. Different states have different demographics. Just the numbers, Governor. Did Michigan's increase exceed Florida's? According to those figures, yes. So evidence suggests turnout rose despite your laws, not because of them. She let that hang in the air. But let's move on. You stated turnout increased in every demographic category. Did you personally review that breakdown? My staff provided the analysis. Crockett opened a folder. I have the official report from your Division of Elections. Page 47. Turnout among voters aged 18 to 24 decreased by 2.1%. Turnout among voters in low-income precincts decreased by 1.8%. Governor, that's a decrease, so your testimony was inaccurate, wasn't it? The room fell silent. DeSantis took a slow breath. Comparing mid-term cycles involves comparing apples to apples, she replied. But let's talk about election integrity. You define that as ensuring only eligible voters cast ballots and every legal vote is counted. Correct? Yes. And your laws, strict ID, reduced early voting, drop-box restrictions, were necessary because of evidence of widespread fraud? There was evidence of vulnerabilities. How many incidents, Governor? I don't have the precise. I do. She lifted a document. From 2000 to 2020, Florida investigated 75 potential fraud cases. 31 resulted in charges. That's 31 cases over 80 million ballots cast, a rate of 0.038%. Does that qualify as widespread? One fraudulent vote is one too many. I agree completely, Crockett said, a sharp edge entering her voice for the first time. So let's talk about disenfranchisement. How many legitimate voters being prevented from voting is too many? DeSantis was silent. Governor? That's a hypothetical. No, Governor, it's math. Crockett leaned forward. You decided preventing 0.038% fraud is worth making it harder for thousands of eligible citizens to vote. Is that accurate? The tension was palpable. She wasn't finished. On November 3, 2022, you gave a deposition under oath in Williams v. Florida. Do you recall being asked if your laws prevent any eligible voter from casting a ballot? I don't recall the specific phrasing. Let me refresh you. She raised a bound transcript. You answered, I believe our laws create a fair system. However, I acknowledge that in specific individual circumstances, certain provisions may present challenges for some voters. She set the transcript down deliberately. Specific, individual circumstances may present challenges. That's under oath, where lying is a felony. Today, you claimed they create no suppressive effect. Which statement should we believe? The one under penalty of perjury or the one under political embarrassment? DeSantis's face flushed. You're taking it out of context. I have the full context, page 104. You were asked if restrictions on returning mail ballots might hinder elderly or disabled voters. Your answer, it is possible that some voters might find it more difficult. She closed the transcript. More difficult. Your words, under oath. So, are you lying then, or are you lying now? The silence was absolute. Senator Whitfield granted her more time. Crockett opened a new folder. "You've positioned yourself as a constitutional defender. Let's discuss the 15th, 19th, 24th, and 26th Amendments. All federal interventions on state voting rights. The Constitution explicitly gives the federal government a role in protecting voting rights. The question is, what counts as infringement?" She held up a final document. "This is an affidavit from Doris Henderson, 73, of Miami-Dade. She voted for 52 years until 2022. She couldn't get a required ID because the nearest DMV was 27 miles away, and she doesn't drive. Is her constitutional right to vote less important than your commitment to state sovereignty?" She set the paper down, delivering the final, devastating blow. "So what this committee deserves to know: did you lie in your deposition when you admitted your laws create barriers? Or are you lying now when you claim they don't?" The weight of accountability, rare and terrible, settled over the room. Governor DeSantis left through a side entrance, avoiding the press. The confrontation was already exploding across the nation. Crockett views DeSantis trended #1 on Twitter. Cable news replayed the exchanges endlessly. Legal analysts called it textbook cross-examination. Even conservative outlets struggled to defend him, with one anchor admitting, "You can't say one thing under oath and something different before Congress." Polls showed his approval rating dropped, particularly among independents. Moderate Republicans created distance. Senator Mitt Romney said, "That's not a difference of opinion. That's a contradiction that needs explaining." For Crockett, the aftermath brought national recognition and requests for interviews. She remained characteristically measured, releasing a statement. "This was never about scoring points. It was about ensuring our laws align with our Constitution. My job is to conduct oversight based on facts, not political narratives." The most profound impact came 3 weeks later. The Florida legislature, with quiet encouragement from DeSantis' office, passed a bill making modest but meaningful changes. Expanding accepted IDs, extending Dropbox hours, and creating a mobile DMV program, directly addressing the kind of barrier Doris Henderson faced. DeSantis signed it without ceremony, a tacit acknowledgement of the hearing's impact. Bipartisan compromise legislation on voting rights, inspired by Crockett's framework, began moving in Congress. It would eventually pass with significant support, a rare moment of cooperation. In law schools, the hearing became a required case study in effective oversight and constitutional argument. Professor Akhil Amar of Yale wrote that Crockett forced DeSantis to reconcile his aspirational constitutional vision with the practical reality of how his policies affect actual citizens. Part 6. Reflection. 6 months later, Crockett received a handwritten letter from Doris Henderson. "Dear Representative Crockett, I was able to vote in the special election last month. The mobile DMV came to our community center. I know that happened because of you. Thank you for fighting for people like me." That was the real story. Not the viral moment or the political fallout, but the quiet victory of one citizen regaining her voice. The hearing became a case study in institutions working as intended, the legislative branch checking executive overreach with facts, law, and rigorous preparation. Preparation isn't glamorous, Crockett later told law students. Nobody films you reading testimony at midnight, but that is where real accountability comes from. If you want to hold power accountable, you have to do the work. In the end, the hearing was a reminder that beneath the partisan noise, a bedrock of law and evidence still matters. For 18 minutes, preparation and principle defeated polish and performance. The question for the future is whether we will demand that from all our leaders. If you believe in this kind of substantive accountability, share this video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe thorough preparation and constitutional principle can still win in modern politics?